Hello and welcome to That's Odd. I'm Nadia Giordana and my partner in crime is Lynn Garthwaite. Hi, Lynn.
Hi there, good morning.
What are we going to be talking about today?
This is going to be fascinating, at least I think it is. We're going to be talking about ancient civilizations and kind of the quirky or odd things we know about them or discovered about them. That, they've been under investigation for hundreds of years now, people making discoveries up until, they're still making discoveries about them.
Do you, like I do, watch the television shows that talk about all those unsolved mysteries and interesting things about old? I do that too. I watch those things, and I was looking for interesting things for us for today, and I tried to find things that I hadn't seen before.
Right.
So I tried to skirt around some of the things that I've seen an awful lot. So
right.
What do you got for us?
There are a lot of things that, everybody knows, kind of like mummies and things like that. But I found a couple of interesting things that I had not known before. There was a guy in ancient Greece named Hero of Alexandria who invented the first vending machine. So this was around the year 60 AD, and it was coin operated, so a coin would go into a slot, it would land on some kind of platform which would open a valve, which would then dispense water. And when the coin would fall off the landing spot, and I'm not sure exactly how that worked, the valve would close and the water would stop. So the very first vending machine.
I'll be darned, I never heard of that.
Kind of cool, yeah.
I never heard of that. Well, and I learned that feta cheese has been around since ancient Greek days.
Okay.
So I guess we assume that cheeses are fairly old and ancient, but that one goes all the way back, excuse me, to the ancient Greeks.
That's cool. So they were probably raising goats, isn't that a goat cheese?
Yeah.
So okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So
maybe not all that odd, but interesting.
And we're finding all those urns and things of remains of wine and things, so we can tell what they were drinking and eating way back.
I wonder if they ever found any old cheese.
They have. I think I do remember reading about that, and people were being
I wonder if it was still
challenged to try it. I don't know. I don't know if they did. They did. I found something interesting too. The Greeks invented the word ostracize. So we talk about people who have been ostracized. They've been set apart. But it was interesting what they came up with. They had a rule in Athens that if a politician fell out of favor, if the majority of people voted for it, they would send him away for 10 years. He would actually be sent literally out of the city for 10 years, and it was called ostracism. And that's what started that. And it seems like kind of something we might bring back today. It kind of,
I vote for that.
Yeah, it kind of seems like something that might work.
Well, that's almost like banishment.
Right.
Yeah.
It was the idea. But after 10 years, they could come back. And they could, if they had made themselves look better, they could pick up where they left off or
learn
whatever.
their lesson or not.
Perhaps, right. A little ego gets involved.
Well, I learned something, and this has to do with women. Women and is back to ancient Greece. They must have done all the interesting things
they were
in the
pretty advanced
ancient cultures. Women's hair dyes were made from sulfur and lead.
I've heard that, and in fact, the eye black that they put on too.
Some of their makeups too had toxic chemicals in them.
Yes.
So they were very beautiful. I suppose it maybe wasn't as critical as that would be today because they didn't live to the ages that we live today. Were they dying in their 20s and 30s anyway, or was it the makeup and hair
Well,
dye?
maybe there was lead throughout all the things, even what they were drinking out of.
Yeah,
and things.
because they wouldn't have known.
Right, exactly.
I
So
thought that
interesting.
was interesting.
About the pyramids in Egypt, we often picture those three on the Giza plateau as the main ones, and they are the biggest, and the Sphinx is right there too. But there were actually, so far to date, we've discovered 130 pyramids throughout Egypt. So it's kind of spread all over.
I thought there was a half dozen.
Yeah, I know, but a lot of them are smaller. And it's interesting to know that some of the ways that they've been built, we've found kind of the same things in places in South America. So kind of interesting, the same technique. Like, how did that happen?
Yeah, you know, they didn't have radio, TV, or communication. No. How did these people come up with similar forms of architecture?
And that's when we get into ancient aliens, but that's another topic. So
that'll be a whole nother show.
Yeah, exactly. So,
well, I learned about something that I hadn't heard about before, and it's called the Baghdad Battery.
Okay.
And maybe not quite as ancient. The connection to real ancient is that I've also read about even more ancient forms of batteries that have been found. But the one in Baghdad, and I think I'll be able to get a picture for people to see, was discovered, when was it? In 1800, or it was actually invented in 1800 by a Count Alessandro, I love that name, Alessandro Volta. And he made this battery, and it's in a couple of museums. They say it was maybe would have worked, maybe not.
Okay.
So it's a kind of a poor excuse for a battery, but people have been trying to store power.
Right. It was an early way to store and distribute power.
But even way back farther than that, there were some artifacts that were found that looked and acted like they must have been batteries.
Yeah, I think I remember on some Egyptian hieroglyphs, they have found things that also resemble that, and it's kind of like, what were they doing?
What was going on with
And speaking of the Egyptians, so I was able to attend something fascinating. The Minneapolis Institute of Art had an exhibit recently called the Egypt's Sunken Cities. And they have just relatively recently, in the last couple of decades, discovered a sunken city, flooded out, whatever, and all these artifacts that have been under there for hundreds of years, untouched, and they've been able to bring them to the surface, and they're making the rounds. The whole country is getting a chance to look at them. But they were in Minneapolis from November to April, and I was able to take a look at it, and we brought back some pictures, so we're going to show that to you right now.
We're going to take a look at that clip.
Great, thanks for coming back. That clip was fun. The exhibit was amazing. I was especially amazed at how well preserved everything was, because we think about Egyptian ruins, they're out in the desert, they're often just really destroyed by the time we even discover them. But these things underwater were all preserved just so beautifully.
What is it about being underwater that preserves things instead of destroys them? It starts to destroy them, but then seems to be a point where everything's just preserved.
Right, and the cold water, I'm not sure what it was, but I was amazed. For instance, those large slabs that they call stele, that have rows and rows of the hieroglyphics on it. It looked like it had been made 2 weeks ago. Yeah. It was that fresh, that clean, and some of the statues like that too. And what was interesting in the little film that they showed, that you could see at the exhibit, when they were discovering this, so the scuba divers were underwater and they were like brushing silt aside, and then like a face would appear because they'd uncover a statue and the face would be looking right at them. It was so cool. That had to have been the neatest thing for those
I could spend hours at an exhibit like that.
Yep. So we have some more did you know moments.
Yes, and I looked up something in Egypt that I've heard about it before. It's called the Saqqara Bird.
Okay.
And it's made out of wood. And it's hand carved, and I think we'll have a picture of that too. It's hand carved, but the bird's body looks almost like the fuselage of an airplane.
Okay.
And the wings of the bird are carved separately and then notched out, set in across the back of the top of the bird, just like an airplane.
Oh.
And it almost looks like a model airplane that looks like a bird instead of a bird that looks like an airplane.
Right.
They certainly didn't have airplanes in those days.
Right.
And the question is, what was it? Was it a model for something? Was someone thinking about human flight
Right.
in an object and using birds? Or was it just a kid's toy?
Interesting.
Because it's only about this so big.
What inspired it is really interesting.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Okay, that's interesting. I learned something about in ancient Greece, they began the Olympics, as you know, and they would actually pause any war that was going on when the Olympics came around so that all of the competitors could come safely and not worry about, going through a war zone to get to the Olympics.
Wish we could do that today.
I know. They resumed the war after they were done, so kind of a interesting concept.
Yeah, that would be really cool.
Yeah.
Oh, and I found a place, not Greece or Egypt, finally, China.
Okay.
And there's something called Dropa Stones.
Okay.
And they were found in ancient China. And they're, judging from the picture, they're about the size of phonograph records.
Okay.
And they're round stones, very reminiscent of phonograph records, almost eerily, even to a center hole in the middle, only it's a hole about that size. And the inscriptions going around are in a spiral form.
So that's how you'd have to read it.
Yeah,
in that
and what
spiral.
did I learn? Oh, they dated them to 500 million, no, not that one. They dated them way, way, way back. Okay, and the Russians, because it's China, some Russian researchers got access to study them, and we've never heard a thing since.
Uh-oh.
So either they didn't learn anything, or they haven't put it out
Released
to
it.
the public to
Maybe.
see what it might be, or not even theories as to what they might be.
Well, and the ancient Chinese were known for a lot of early things like, making explosives and things like that. So I wonder if there were some secrets in that, that the Russians did not want to release to the rest of us.
Yeah, it could be.
That's interesting.
I like to think of things like that.
I know. It's odd. It's interesting.
It's definitely odd.
Believe it or not, the ancient Egyptians invented toothpaste. And you might think, we've all seen that gaping maw of mummies, whatever. It doesn't look like they had much success with tooth decay.
Do they have teeth?
Well,
yeah, they usually do.
Yeah, but they're in a pretty destroyed state. But it could be that they hadn't yet invented fluoride.
Yeah.
But the fact that they invented toothpaste was interesting because it showed that they were aware of the fact that you needed to have dental health. You know, that was part of the whole health regimen.
That they cared about that.
Yeah, exactly. So that was interesting.
Well, yeah, because did it say what their toothpaste was made of?
No, I didn't see that.
That'd
so
be interesting.
I know.
Yeah.
Probably snakes and things.
Not
Why
minty
not?
fresh that way.
No, exactly.
Well, I learned about something called the London hammer.
Okay.
And this was found, by a Max Hahn and his wife Emma. But the carbon dating suggests 500 million years ago, and it's a crude hammer that's encased in stone. And there's a lot of theories about whether that carbon dating was correct or not, or how that stone got around it. But they dated it again, and they said the hammer was even older than the stone around it, which would still be very interesting.
Yeah.
But no one's come up with a reason for it, or that we don't think man was around at that time, but how did that?
So it might have been a natural formation that just looks like a hammer? Or again,
No, it
ancient
really was a hammer. I saw a photograph of
okay.
it, and if I can get a copy, I'll put it on so that people can see. It's made out of iron.
Oh, interesting.
And an extremely pure iron.
So we're back to the ancient aliens theory, possibly.
Yeah, I guess
So
we are.
I had an interesting thing. I saw the show, I think it was on like the Smithsonian Channel. They were trying to answer the question, why did the Egyptians stop building pyramids? There's been a lot of talk about why they started, what they're for, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Why did they stop? That was interesting. The whole show was fascinating, but the conclusion was basically that Egypt at that time, or at a period of time, went through about a 20-year drought. Now they needed the Nile River and they needed it to be deep and fast moving in order to move those huge stones that they used to build the pyramids. They quarried them quite a ways away and moved them in. So that was a problem. Once the drought hit and the Nile River was down to low depths, they couldn't do that. But also, all of the people who worked on pyramids in their off seasons were farmers, and they relied on the very fertile Nile Delta area to do their farming. And once, after a few years of drought, that kind of dried up, and a lot of them moved into towns and cities farther away, and so the manpower dried up along with the river.
That made sense, and that matches up with, I think it matches up with the biblical stories of the famines and the grain silos and the Egyptians and
right, and they can they can prove that geologically. They can tell when droughts happened and for how long, how many years and stuff.
And it's understandable then that the rulers of the time would have stored and hoarded as much as they could with the droughts coming on.
Right.
Oh, how interesting.
Yeah.
So. Well, a fossil of a human handprint at one point was found in limestone, estimated to be 110 million years old.
Okay.
Now, how can that be?
I just don't know.
Man is not 110
that
million.
Is odd. Ask the monkeys. They've got all the answers.
Yeah, and it said among other human-looking imprints, I think one was a finger, and different things, but definitely not ape or primate.
Right.
But, and handprints, I think we're all fascinated with human handprints.
Right.
And
it tells us a lot about the early man.
Well, we should change gears here now and go to, like we say before, we don't always cook on the show, but when we do, it's something odd. I have a surprise for you.
Okay.
I have a recipe. It came out of my father's recipe box, and he got it from probably one of his oddball Alaska friends.
Oh, no.
And it's called trail cake.
Okay.
I'll tell you this much, there are no bugs in it.
Okay.
So you don't have to be too afraid.
Fair enough.
But we're going to see a clip, which you won't see, just our audience will see it, and then we'll come back and I'm going to have a piece of this cake for you to try and see if you can guess what that secret ingredient is.
Oh my, I'm ready.
So let's take a look at that clip. Now that was fun and interesting, and I know that you haven't seen it
Correct.
yet, but the audience now knows what the secret ingredient is, and they're not too freaked out, but they are thinking, that is really odd. I wonder what that tastes like.
She's going to try that. Well,
Yeah.
regular viewers of this show
Yeah.
will know that Nadia cooks with unusual things sometimes. We had a delicious spam and seaweed concoction.
We did
That
that.
caramel thing was wonderful.
That was good.
That was good.
That
But
was good.
okay, so there's an ingredient in here.
Yes.
Are you thinking I'll be able to guess what it is?
I think once
there
I
gonna be
knew
a-
what it was, I could. Think chocolate beet cake. Can you tell? I've never
like
been able to
can
tell
you taste
it.
the beet, you mean?
Think carrot cake.
Right.
So this is a spice cake.
Okay, I'm
but
thinking carrot cake because if there's something really weird in there, I'm not gonna. No, all right.
Take a taste
You
and
keep
see if you
talking.
can tell.
The frosting is incredible.
I know, but that's cream cheese frosting. That hides a lot of things. So is it? What's really good about it? Is it the frosting or is it the cake?
Well, both actually. The cake is very good. I don't think I can identify the weird ingredient though, which is a good thing maybe.
It is a good thing.
Is it a healthy thing?
Yeah.
Okay, so tell
Yeah,
me what
it
it
is a healthy thing.
Reveal.
It is crushed pinto beans,
Oh,
squashed
dried?
beans. They were cooked
Okay.
out of the can, squashed like beans, and put
Now
into
that's
the cake.
interesting because
I
that would be a
know.
really healthy ingredient.
Yeah.
You know, like parents are always trying to get healthy things into their kids' foods.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of recipes now for
Yeah.
that, how you can squish up vegetables and make it.
And the actual recipe did not call for frosting. I did
Oh.
that to get you
Thank
to
you.
eat it.
I appreciate that. That was very good.
The genuine recipe is just the cake as a snack cake
Okay.
without frosting. And I know my father tried to get my mother to make it, but she never did.
Oh, because you just looked at the ingredients and
Yeah.
said, no thanks.
Yeah. So
Good.
fun.
I'm glad you had me try that. That
Yeah.
really was very good.
Yay.
Yeah, good deal.
We'll share it with the studio.
All right, so again, we covered a lot of odd things. We talked about odd history, odd current events, and odd food. And it was just a fun episode. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.